My lords, today we are going to discuss this report has been corrupted, initializing new report. New topic, Warship girls. In a distant galaxy, my lords, it appears that there exists an entire species of sentient warships that have been modelled on the female form. I'm not entirely sure whether they're organic or mechanical, I think the latter, but nevertheless they appear to operate as units of individual empires. And we have identified 7 different factions: the Fantasy Star Naval Group, the Port Trade Alliance, Superport Federations, the Abyssal Fleet, the Parith Empire Annihilation Fleet, and the United Fleet. Now, these empires appear to be split, divided by a messy and brutal war. According to the limited data that we've been able to muster, 2 factions previously fought, the Warship Girls and the Abyssals. Around 2100, the Abyss and humanity would clash in what would later be known as the Doomsday War. The Warship Girls were humanity's created weapon against the Abyss. It's quite unclear how or why they were constructed, but they were effective indeed. In the following 50 years, the Abyss was relying too heavily on a single decisive weapon, and apparently neglected basic command structures. They suffered defeats in several crucial battles and ultimately collapsed in 2150, about 50 years since the conflict had begun. When the Abyss's last fortress fell, 8 arcs secretly built by the Abyss slowly rose from the sea in an attempt to escape. Despite interception attempts, 6 of them did indeed manage to escape. Although humanity and the Warship Girls had achieved a final victory, 50 years of war would severely damage humanity's ecosystem and the planet known as Home Port. This would lead to the gradual extinction of humanity over the next 50 or so years. The remaining Warship Girls would form a united government with the sole goal of rebuilding the home port and, via back engineering the hyperspace engines from the 2 intercepted Abyssal arcs, would achieve FTL capability in the year 2200. Effectively from this, 3 factions of Warship Girls would emerge: the Superport Federation, the Port Trade Alliance, and the Fantasy Star Naval Group. The Port Trade Alliance is a faction defined by mercantilism, survival, and debt, and their story is odd indeed. Following the final battle at the home port, the Warship Girls achieved victory, but the ecosystem, as I mentioned, was left entirely uninhabitable. Unlike the other factions that would try to colonize new worlds immediately, the Alliance was forced to make a desperate deal. They owe their survival to something called the Prize Shop, also known as the Loot Shop or the Broken Chair Clan. This mysterious group of merchants provided them with a habitat to live on, because of course the home planet was destroyed. However, the deal appears murky indeed. The Warship Girls need to trade in some odd currencies, as far as we can work out, undergarments, in order to maintain residence on this station. Despite this very odd arrangement, they remain xenophilic and fanatically materialistic, skilled traders, but they have an addiction to coffee, a frankly odd addiction to collecting chairs. I have no idea why. The Superport Federation is the next faction. This is defined by an ideological purity, democracy, and expansionism. This faction was formed by unifying the home port through force. They eliminated other Warship Girl factions that refused to submit to their specific worldview, which they call shipyard ideology. They believe themselves to be the perfect democratic society, and that their way of life is the only correct one, and for some moral reason, they have an obligation to now liberate the rest of the galaxy, bringing the so-called winds of the shipyard ideology to every world they encounter. As you may have guessed, they are militaristic and fanatically xenophobic. There is a third faction, however, that appears to be somewhat of a balance between the two, though in reality how they actually interact is not that clear to us at this stage. The Fantasy Star Naval Group brings these 2 factions together. They are egalitarian, also fanatically materialistic, as well as sharing the Port Trade Alliance's coffee addiction. In contrast to the 3 Warship Girl groups, we have the remnants of the Abyss Fleet, or Abyssal Fleet, those who survived the earlier war. After escaping in 2150, their fleet would wander aimlessly before splitting into 3 subgroups, in the hope to improve their survival. The second fleet was swallowed and destroyed by a void cloud. The third fleet encountered space amoebas and would crash onto a barren planet and subsequently perish in its entirety. The first fleet, however, survived. During its wanderings, the first fleet discovered an ancient Overlord-class warship that they would later rename the Guardian. The first fleet was able to reactivate this mighty warship into their own, a great boon indeed, and they would go on to design new and powerful kinetic weapons, basing them on the design of said ship. The Abyssal First Fleet would go on to settle a pre-FTL world. They took it by force, and it is here that they remain, incredibly powerful and quite likely to awaken once again. They are led by the flagship, the Yamato, quite possibly the most powerful warship in their galaxy. The final key player in their galaxy, and perhaps one that may even threaten our own one day, is known as the Alliance. There exists an extremely ancient warship girl species, one that far outdates those built by humanity. They would go through their own origin war, but more importantly, post-war, they would begin to expand and explore. It was during this period of exploration they came to the conclusion that they were not the first warship girls to appear. Further exploration of the galaxy would reveal increasingly ancient ship girl civilizations. These pioneering civilizations would vary in size and strength, with vastly different origins, ideologies, and political systems. Ultimately, they would begin to vanish over time for various reasons, only to then be reborn again after many years, a seemingly cyclical pattern. Gradually, the doctrine that all shipgirl civilizations were caught in a tragic cycle would become the mainstream thinking of the Allied forces. By this time, the Alliance possessed the resources of their entire galaxy. Countless new warships had been created, and it had a powerful fleet that was capable of crushing any enemy. However, the Alliance believed that without them taking action, even with their formidable strength, they would ultimately be unable to escape this cycle of destruction. After long periods of further exploration and contemplation, the Alliance concluded that the other galaxies must also possess shipgirl civilizations similar to theirs. By sheltering and protecting all shipgirl civilizations from annihilation, they hoped that they could lead their species out of the cycle of fate. After hundreds of years of preparation, with the mission of shattering the cycle of destiny, the Alliance fleet set sail for the next galaxy. Despite possessing near godlike power, they would of course find themselves unable to save everyone. Their thinking would shift, becoming increasingly extreme. They began to re-examine their goals and replan their methods. Ultimately, they found what they believed to be the best way to end the cycle. They would destroy all life-giving conditions. Essentially, they would destroy planets. Any habitable stellar body in a system would be destroyed. Thus, in their mind, the cycle would end. The closed loop would be broken. Even so, the Alliance maintains its principle of protecting shipgirl civilizations as much as they can. For efficiency, they normally transform the galaxy into a large black hole, bringing about annihilation. However, if a shipgirl civilization exists within said galaxy, then the Alliance fleet will use an acceptance ceremony. This acceptance ceremony is essentially a war. The Alliance will send their ships at the shipgirl civilization. If they can survive the invasion fleet's attack and successfully destroy their gateway, the Alliance will consider this shipgirl civilization mature enough to be integrated into the Alliance. It is indeed possible, my lords, that we will witness this Alliance come to our galaxy one day, and we must be ready for it. Perhaps this is the true hunter after all. Shout out to the creators of the Warship Girls mod, and happy April Fool's Day everybody.